Last week I was driving back home from my grandma's birthday party. My family all lives close to each other, but 5 hours away from me. So my plan had been to spend the night and leave the next day around lunch. But then I got into a big fight with my brother, one of the worst we've ever had. My parents ended up taking his side like they always do, and I just figured it was time for me to go. It was about 10 o'clock when I left their house, and it was about midnight when I started to regret my decision. It was so far to drive that late and I was really tired. I'd considered stopping on a tiny motel, but the route I was taking consisted of tiny towns, connected by long stretches of wooded roads. And I don't think there was a single spot for me to stay across my entire journey. I was on the longest, darkest part of the drive, a stretch nearly 100 miles, without any real sign of people other than the occasional townhouse or store. I began toying with the idea of just parking and taking a nap as my fatigue worsened. And when I woke up, starting to veer, I knew it was a necessity. I decided I would stop to sleep, but only when I reached the next semi-populated spot in the road. I knew all the tricks to try to stay awake. I rolled down my window, I tried to sing along with the radio. I rolled back up the window and even cranked up the air. I even slapped myself hard enough to make my face tingle. The thing is, these are all half measures. They are sandbags against the rising tide of sleep, meant only to delay the inevitable for only a few seconds. Getting out of the car, caffeine, actual sleep, these were the only things I knew that could really roll things back once you were truly on the edge of falling asleep in the middle of the road. I had no caffeinated drinks with me, and I had no idea how many more miles it would be before I saw streetlights again. But rightly or wrongly, I was going to sleep in my car. I wanted at least the suggestion of civilization and order surrounding me. So that left getting out of the car and walking around. I didn't love the idea of stopping at night on some dark and lonely country road, but it seemed a better option than when I eventually get into a wreck when I fall asleep for a second too long. The part of the road I was on was winding, with thick stands of ancient-looking trees looming over the road on both sides. It was nearly a full moon, but the shadows of reaching branches covered the road in an endless slivery tiger stripe of alternating light and dark. I drove on, looking for a straighter, brighter patch of road, but none came, and with each mile I felt myself drifting deeper and deeper. Muttering under my breath, I pulled the car over to a semi-street section of road that was maybe 100 feet long before it snaked off in new directions. I hit my emergency lights, hoping to keep any late-night drunk drivers from plowing into me or my car, and got out. The air was colder than I expected, even for October, colder than it had seemed when I rolled down the window earlier while driving. It was weird, but I was also half asleep and didn't necessarily trust my logic at the moment. Moved in front of my car and began walking in a circle within the glow of my headlights before transitioning into jumping jacks. I knew it looked stupid, but at a glance, my surroundings made it clear that no one was around. Aside from my car's headlights, the only source of illumination was the intermediate glow of the moonlight above. The only sounds aside from those shivering leaves on the ground was my car engine and my own puffing breaths as I went through my midnight workout routine. But then I heard something else. I stopped at the noise and listened, but there was nothing. After a few seconds, I decided it was my imagination and was about to head back to my car, and then I heard it again. It was whistling, not the cry of some bird, but the high, clear notes of a familiar tune. It was Chill Bill by Rob Stone. My skin began to prickle as I recognized the song and joined the music in my ears. It went on for at least 10 seconds this time before stopping, and it was enough for me to tell it wasn't a recording or some scrap from a distant radio carried on to me from a tide in the nighttime air. No, someone or something was whistling a song in the dark, and they were close. Trying to keep myself from breaking into a panic run, I went back to my car and pulled on the handle. The doors locked. I had locked it as a precaution when I got out because I had the image of someone sneaking into the back seat while I was outside with my back turned. The irony wasn't lost on me now. But my main focus was getting out my key and unlocking the door. I fumbled desperately in my pocket as the whistling started up again for a few moments, much closer this time. It seemed like a different part of the same song, though I couldn't say for sure. I yanked the keys from my pocket instead of jabbing it shakily at the lock when I heard my car's engine shudder to a stop. A small whine of terror escaped me as I tried to find the lock, this time successfully. Turning the key, I froze as the whistling began a third time, now directly behind me. I could smell something now, a mixture of several strong smells, like someone was mixing cinnamon, garlic, and rotten eggs all in a hot skillet. I gagged slightly and was readying myself to yank the door open when the whistling stopped again. The smell grew stronger. Then I felt a small burning kiss on the back of my neck. The next few seconds were a panic blur. I yanked open the door, got in, slamming it shut, without daring to look out and see what might be looking in at me. Locking the doors with one hand, I cranked the car over with the other. I almost cried with the relief when it immediately came back to life. I thought I heard a light scratching at my window as I threw the car into drive and sped off into the night. I had no trouble with drowsiness the rest of my drive home, and it wasn't until the next evening that I finally fell into an exhausted sleep. I don't have any explanation for what happened out on the road. And as the days have passed, I found myself rationalizing it more and more as some kind of waking dream or false memory. They were probably brought on by my brief moments of sleep that night as I drove home. But then last night I woke up to a terrible smell in my room. It smelled of garlic, cinnamon, and sulfur. I sat up in my bed, my eyes wide and my heart hammering as I stared into the dark. But then I heard it, the whistling, and it was coming from underneath my bed. I bolted from the room and out of my house, running to my next door neighbor's house and hammering on my neighbor's door in my underwear. Warily, my neighbor eventually agreed to call the police. When the officers came, they found nothing, no signs of a break-in or anything stolen. No trace any intruder was ever there. And for the most part, they were right. When I returned home in the early hours of the morning, I did my own search for signs that some person or thing had been there. At first, I saw nothing out of the ordinary, but then I looked more closely under the bed. There was a minuscule amount of dirt there, strange greenish gray dirt, unlike anything I'd ever seen. And mixed in with the dirt was what looked like small patches of dried skin, as though something was molting. I don't know what to do or if I'll even have another chance to write this down, so I'm taking this time now, mainly so my account is known if something happens to me. I don't know what this thing is, but I feel sure it will find me again soon. The thought of it terrifies me, but that's not the worst part. See, the more I think about it, the more certain I am that every time it whistles, it's a different part of the same song, almost as though it wants me or needs me to hear the entire thing. Since I realized that, a single question has been haunting me. It casts its shadow over everything else, like the twisted reaching branches of an ancient tree darkening some lonesome midnight road. What will it do when it finishes the song?